Equity Mates, from our mates at Spaceship. Investing made easy.
Welcome to another episode of Equity Mates here on Tuesday. We're excited to be back. As always, my name is Bryce and I am always joined by my equity buddy, Ren. How are you going?
I am very good, Bryce.
Well, it's always you.
Always joined you. Today. At some point, maybe we'll have to just go one out.
Jeez, that would be interesting. But look, there's a lot going on in markets at the moment, and this one may have slipped under the radar, depending on what news you're reading. But we're going to be reviewing the Oz-UK trade deal.
I'm pretty confident that people who watch AusBiz or who read the AFR probably didn't slip under their radar.
But maybe for people in the Equity Mates community who are busy buzzing around at work all day, not fortunate enough to be watching AusBiz or read the AFR.
You make a very good point.
They may have missed this one. But look, it's pretty important.
Well, is it?
We're about to find out. The cliffhanger.
Yeah.
So we're going to be reviewing what happened, how the deal was made, and yeah, I guess answering the question, does it actually make a difference to our trading relationship with the UK, the markets, and our economy here in Australia?
Yeah, so let's start with what happened. Australia and the UK last week struck a free trade agreement, the first free trade agreement for the UK since its divorce from the EU.
Since Brexit.
So big milestone for Boris Johnson's government.
Yeah.
And this one I just thought was funny. Officials will turn the in-principle agreement into a document of over 700 pages.
Not surprised.
And I don't know if you followed the El Salvador Bitcoin law a couple of weeks ago now, where they made Bitcoin legal tender.
Yeah.
That whole law was published online, 3 pages. So I'm thinking
3 pages.
maybe Australian trade officials could take a leaf out of the El Salvadorian government's playbook and just really condense the text.
And keep things simple.
Yeah, just dot point it.
Yeah. So I guess that means it's actually going to be a while until things are in place.
Yes.
Yeah.
I think they're thinking this time next year.
Wow.
Yeah.
Whereas things are up and running in El Salvador.
They are. So I guess let's take a step back. What do we mean when we talk about free trade agreements? It's basically the reduction in tariffs and other forms of government protection on local industries. So whether that's, taxing British cars being imported into Australia, or, subsidising, the EU subsidises a lot of agriculture over there. It's reducing those protections and allowing global players to compete on a level playing field.
Globalisation.
Yeah. Now, interestingly, I think where we need to start with this is that the predicted benefits of this may not be that high. I think there's been a lot of fanfare made about it. Scott Morrison was obviously over there.
He was over there,
handing Boris Johnson Tim Tams.
Yeah.
But there's some questions about the actual size of this trade deal. But even before we talk about this deal in particular, just generally free trade agreements, there is a question about them. So the Australian Productivity Commission has come out and stated that free trade agreements actually don't increase our export volumes. All they do is change the destination of those exports.
What? Because if one market is closed down, another opens up, or?
Well, yeah, if you take tariffs off a certain market, then for exporters, that's a better financial outcome. So they redirect exports there. But, and I should have read more of the report, but I think the implication is that the reason that they're not producing more to export more are not tied to foreign countries' trade settings, but more to do with
actual demand of the product, or
and the ability, their production capacity and stuff like that, their ability to get raw materials or to actually produce the agricultural commodity. So I think that's starting point about.
So it's just all potentially a bit of a political fanfare.
Well, let's get into that. So I think the next thing, so taking a step down from free trade agreements generally into the Australia-UK trading relationship in particular, despite our historic ties, the Australia-UK trade channel is actually quite small.
Tiny.
So total trade, imports plus exports for Australia, $38.5 billion. That seems like a big number. Until,
Does it?
Well, it's not a small number.
Yeah, I know, but like, I don't know, for two pretty big countries, it just feels small.
Yeah.
Well, it is small.
Well, it's small compared to this number. So 38.5 for Australia, UK. China, 252 billion.
Yeah,
for
that
Australia.
sounds...
So more than 5 times the size.
Yeah.
Japan, 87 billion. So a bit less than triple our UK relationship. Europe, 84.5 billion. The USA, 81 billion.
I thought the US would have been more than that.
Well,
But
they're
that's
the
because
numbers.
they got it. I'm not debating the numbers. But that's interesting. So really what it's highlighting is how, the UK really pales in significance to a lot of our other trading partners.
Yeah. Especially our Asian neighbours. China, biggest. Japan, second biggest. South Korea is also bigger than the UK. So yeah, that's really the first thing. From Australia's point of view, there are bigger trading partners. From the UK's point of view, there are also much bigger trading partners. Not surprising.
The rest of Europe.
Not surprising, yeah. Especially because Brexit just happened. But UK-EU trade is about 47 times UK-Australia trade. So a UK-EU trade deal will just have such a bigger impact for the UK than their Australia trade deal. So look, to put some numbers on it, for the UK, UK government officials expect British exports to Australia to increase by about £900 million. To put that in context, 2019, UK exports to Australia were £18.1 billion.
So nothing.
5%.
Nothing. So it just kind of feels like if you put everything into perspective here, it's a pretty weak deal.
Well,
from UK's perspective.
Well, hold on, we'll get to that. So to put some more numbers to it, the elimination of tariffs on Australian products, including Vegemite,
Perfect.
critical, will save British consumers £34 million. So like not a big number, but again, not a small
that
number.
meaningful, yeah.
Jeez, you gotta.
I don't think it's that meaningful. £34 million. How many people in the UK are there? I don't know.
ask.
Anyway.
Yeah. And this number's gonna set you off, given your stance about numbers and how they're too small. The UK government estimates that this trade deal will add 0.02% to GDP.
How long did this negotiation take?
Apparently, it was
700 pages for this.
Yeah.
Unbelievable.
Hey, it's hard to grow GDP these days.
Imagine what the deal's going to look like when they start trying to do it with the EU.
Well, that's a whole different AusBiz episode. So there are some of the numbers from the UK. For Australia, it'll add about $1.3 billion to the Australian economy. Again, not a small number, but keep in mind that Australia's economy is $1.4 trillion.
Yeah. So in monetary terms, the UK is actually going to do better. £900 million when converted to USD is probably a bit more than 1.3 billion.
Yeah, but that's just exports to Australia. So going back to that Productivity Commission report, are they actually increasing total export volumes, or are they just redirecting those exports to Australia?
Yeah, true.
Yeah. So before we talk about winners and losers and then some of the stocks that you might want to watch, with the clear caveat being that
there's no change.
Bryce doesn't pay these numbers, so maybe the CEOs of these companies will not pay these numbers either. I was reading a Reuters article before, and just to put in perspective how the UK are looking at the deal, I pulled out a couple of quotes which I think really sum it up. First quote: "The terms give a sense of Prime Minister Boris Johnson's priorities and his weak negotiating position." So Reuters pulling no punches. And then the second quote: But even though Britain's GDP is double Australia's 1.4 trillion, Johnson looks to have made concessions without getting much in return.
Soft.
So, there's a lot of talk about how Johnson needed a free trade agreement post-Brexit, and Australia...
so this is how he's just made a political statement, I guess, got the free trade agreement, but really, when you have a look under the hood, there's not a lot there.
Well, it's great that you said there's not a lot there, because let's talk about what is there.
Nice.
By framing it in the context of winners and losers, and this is where we'll get into a bit of the detail about the trade deals themselves.
Yeah.
Do you want to kick it off? Do you want to start talking about some winners?
Sure. Australia, agriculture. Tariff reductions on Australian wine, so great news for Treasury, I would assume, if we're going to talk about stocks in a minute. That is eliminated immediately, which is...
once they finalise the 700-page
Once they finalise the
document.
700-page document. Meat, reduction of tariffs on meat, which is eliminated over 10 years.
Yeah.
Now that's pretty slow. And I think there's an additional quotas going to be reviewed.
So there'll be a quota, and if it goes, the meat exports go above that quota, there will be a tariff. Apparently, the tariff on Australian lamb was like 80% before the trade deal. Yeah.
Wow. Jeez, I wonder what New Zealand is. A reduction in tariffs on dairy, again, not immediate to immediate effect. That's elimination over 5 years. Sugar, elimination over 8 years, again with quotas, same as dairy. And rice, we're going to see an elimination immediate effectively once the 700-page document is written. British farm workers will be able to work in Australia under a specialist visa, which is great news for us given what's going on over here in the... Well, I guess that's more like picking.
Well, you see, this
stocks,
is the thing. It's not great news for Australian fruit and veg growers, because whilst wine, meat, dairy, sugar and rice have their tariffs eliminated, fruit and veg growers have their workers, I'm not going to say eliminated, but
True.
10,000 British backpackers every year pick fruit.
Yeah, right.
That's the number, yeah. So with the way that the visa law works, if you want to extend your visa as a British backpacker, you have to go to regional Australia and work on a farm, basically. Apparently 10,000 British backpackers do it a year. As part of this free trade deal, Australia is scrapping that rule.
Yeah.
And instead they're replacing it with this new specialist visa for British farm workers. But that source of farm labour, it's gone.
Yeah, wow.
Once the 700-page document is signed.
Yeah, once document. Speaking of tourism, the backpacker age cutoff has increased to 35 years. That's great for me, just clicking over to 30.
Yeah.
And British backpackers will no longer have to go and do that 88-day regional visit to go and work in regional areas to renew their extension of their visa. So good news to encourage backpackers to stay here longer.
So more British tourists.
More British tourists. And in terms of the professional side of things, there's a mutual recognition of qualifications, which is hoping to boost the movement of professionals between countries. So great news for lawyers and the like who may otherwise have to prove that they know what's going on.
Yeah. So in terms of losers, and this is framed in an Australian perspective because we're Australian,
Yes.
but a lot of the losers are actually British winners, and vice versa. Like we talk about the Australian agricultural sector winning. The Scottish agricultural sector have blown up at this trade deal. The SNP have written a letter to Parliament complaining about it. All these trade industry groups, Scottish industry groups, have got together and are complaining about it. So for every winner, there's a loser. And some of the losers, first of all, Australian car makers, but I don't think they exist.
Yeah, name one Australian car maker.
Because British-made tariffs on British-made cars have been eliminated immediately. And then Australian whiskey and chocolate makers, because tariffs on those products from Britain have been eliminated immediately. We've spoken about the other points. So they are two. We don't have a lot of time, but let's quickly rip through stocks to watch. And I think the headline for this is, given everything we've said above, there will be some individual stocks that do better, but it's not
groundbreaking.
transformational.
It's not groundbreaking, yeah.
Well, I was watching this video earlier of an analyst talking about the deal, and he actually said that Australian banks might be winners because British companies will now open Australian bank accounts. And I just figured if that's the bottom of the barrel that we're scraping.
Yeah.
But Australian agriculture, you know, there's companies like the Australian Agricultural Company, Wellards, Elders, Rural Co. You know, if agriculture does well, they may all do well. Australian wine, Treasury Wine Estates, Australian vintage. Wine is a particularly interesting one because of the China tensions. Yeah. Same with agriculture, really. UK's never going to be the replacement for China.
No, I was just going to say, the export market for us probably pales into significance.
Yeah. This is an interesting one. So I was looking at British car makers to see who's getting their tariffs eliminated. BMW, Mini, but
Mini
it's
Cooper.
owned, Mini, a British car company, but it's owned by the German BMW.
Okay.
Bentley, British car company, but it's owned by the German Volkswagen.
Nice.
And Jaguar, famous British car company, owned by the Indian Tata Motors.
Nice.
So it looks like a lot of those British car makers that may benefit, but again, like how big is it, the Australian market for these British cars? I think it was something like 20,000 British cars were sold in Australia last year, or don't quote me on that number, but it wasn't a massive number. So there's a question about how much some of these stocks will benefit. And if you're thinking that sales of Bentleys are going to increase,
think again.
even if that's true, will that have a material effect on Volkswagen's share price?
Yeah, no.
And then like British alcohol companies, again, like maybe Diageo, but such a big company. It just feels like this trade deal, it's important and there will be some winners, but as a public stock market investor looking for ways to play this trade,
they're not there.
there's probably better macro events to try and profit from.
Yeah. Well, it seems like it's a bit of smoke and mirrors going on here, but look, Boris and ScoMo managed to get the deal done. Maybe there was a lot of political pressure just to get the deal done, and it does feel like that there is not a whole lot of substance. Could be wrong. Really looking forward to the 700 pages coming out, though, which we'll be able to go through in more detail. But as Ren said, I think the important thing to remember here is sometimes remove the noise and have a look at actually what's going on, because if you do try and play these trade deals, often it might not relate to anything in material value.
For shareholders.
Yeah,
there will be plenty of material value for people in those industries.
Yes. Yeah. But anyway, that is all we have time for today. If you would like to find out more about what Equity Mates do, head to equitymates.com. Plenty of information there. We've got all our podcasts. If you would like to sign up to our email as well, equitymates.com/email. But otherwise, we'll be back tomorrow and on Thursday for more stock chat. We've got Watchlist Wednesday coming up, and then Thursday we're closing out the week. So look forward to seeing you tomorrow.
Equity Mates, from our mates at Spaceship. Investing made easy.